Alright, who's your daddy? Perhaps you've looked at photographs of your relatives and wondered where they came from. Or maybe you grew up listening to stories about great grandpa's childhood during the Civil War, or maybe about great Uncle Henry's suspicious death. Perhaps you just want to know where your grandparents came from and what they did for a living. How long has your family been in America? Did they come over on the Mayflower or did they come through Ellis Island? All these questions, stories, and curiosities are a part of genealogy. Genealogy is a record of a family's ancestors. A person needs to decide how far back they would like their tree to go. Some people go back 1 or 2 generations, and others go back 8 or 10 generations. Today, I'm going to discuss some resources that are useful in starting a family tree. First, you would start with yourself. Perhaps you would have a paper like this, and you would put your name and your birthday and your place of birth on there. Then you could write down your spouse's name and his place of birth or birth date, and you could put down your siblings' names and their birth date and places. Then you would move on with your parents, and you would do the same for them, birthday and place of birth. Then you could go next to your grandparents and write down their birthplace and dates and their death dates and place. And you would just go on from there. Local resources to check first would be your family. Your family knows stories they've heard, the stories have been handed down, and they would know places where you could go to look. And also, Family Bible would contain names and dates, birth dates, marriage dates. For instance, the story about Great Uncle Henry's suspicious death. Supposedly, his wife poisoned him with rat poison, and when they had her trial and they exhumed his body, they discovered that he had grass in his stomach because his stomach had been switched with a goat's stomach. And of course, there were no actual signs of poison, so the charges were dropped. And obviously, this was a long time before CSI was invented. The next place you would go to would be newspapers. Obituaries contain all types of useful information. They would have parents' names, spouse names, sibling and children's names, and it would also have cemetery and funeral home information, as well as maybe information about if they were in the military or something that they did. Another place to look would be marriage and birth announcements, which would contain parent and grandparent names. And then you could go to the courthouse in the county where you know where your family came from and look at their birth, death, and marriage records. And maybe also look at the will and land records. These could also be useful. Another good place to go would be the local library. Most libraries today have a genealogy room or an area, and these contain books like cemetery books, which would have a list of all the cemeteries in the county and where they're located, and also some family history books. And if you're lucky, someone may have already done all this work for you, and your family may be in one of those books. The census would be another good place to go for information. It comes out every 10 years, and over the years, some of the information has changed, but you could find out where your ancestor came from, what they did for a living, and their children, how many children they had, and perhaps states where their parents were born. Here are some internet sources that are very useful in looking up information on your family tree. My favorite one is Ancestry.com. It has lots of information. It's ship passenger lists, land warrants, indentured servant lists, and as well as your birth, marriage, and death certificates. And it has free trials, so that's very useful if you don't want to spend a lot of money. Another good place to look is the Social Security Death Index. If your ancestor lived after 1935, which is when the Social Security came out, you could type their name in the search engine and it would show where they lived last and their death date. If your family came from Ellis Island, here are some things that you need to know. Ellis Island opened in 1892 and it closed in 1954. Between the years of 1900 and 1914, there were between 5,000 and 10,000 people who passed through Ellis Island. They came from countries such as Germany, Ireland, France, England, Russia, And in June of 1897, there was a fire which damaged a lot of the immigration records, some dating back to 1840. Two internet resources to look at there are ellisarchives.com, which contains ship passenger lists, and also ellisisland.org. There are many other internet resources to use you will find along the way. These are just some of my favorite, and I think they would be very useful in your family tree. In conclusion, here are some basic ways to start a family tree. Researching one's tree can be fun, entertaining, but also time consuming. But this makes for a great hobby, and you can learn a lot about your family. By using resources like birth, death, and marriage records, as well as the World Wide Web, you can find lots of interesting information on your family. Let's not forget the most valuable resources that we have are your grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. Time spent with them is even more valuable and precious. And this is my source.